The president is here. The 52nd president of the Law Society of Kenya, brand new, having just been sworn in. The labels are still on, and none of that rubber has been torn off yet. Wakili Charles Kanjama is here. Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning to you and to your listeners.
How are you doing?
Quite well, I must say.
February was an interesting month, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the month we had our elections.
Mm-hmm. And you came out on top.
Yeah, to the surprise of a number of people, but...
Not yourself.
Whenever you enter a political contest, you always hope to win. So I want to thank all the voters of the Law Society of Kenya, and particularly those who voted for me. I really appreciate the burden of responsibility they placed on my shoulders, and I'm committed not to let them down.
Okay, well... It's interesting that you say that, because we're going to be having a number of conversations around, okay, so you've won, it's great, and there's a lot of work to be done, and nobody runs away from the reality of the shoes that are to be filled, especially when we saw that the Law Society, through its former president, took on a lot in terms of responsibility, and Kenyans expect more. And not just, to be comfortable in that spot. So, whereas it's great for you to be in that position, there's a lot in terms of demand of the position. But, let's not jump the gun in the progress of this conversation. You know what we do. We go to the African continent, throughout the African continent every week. We come to a country where we bring back their proverbs. And we, of course, love to get your interpretation of today's proverb. It comes out of the Rainbow Nation, South Africa, this week. And this is what today's proverb is. What you help a child to love can be more important than what you help him to learn. What you help a child to love can be more important than what you help him to learn. What do you make of that?
I don't know whether I fully agree with the proverb, but I think both the intellect and the will are equally important in shaping our values. So the heart has to do with the will, and the intellect, the head or learning has to do with the intellect. I think you need both of them to shape our values, our behavior, and our destiny.
You need both.
Yeah.
All right. Well, even as we talk about, I agree, and then being able to look at that interpretation, even as we talk about the new look at the LSK by virtue of the fact that there's a new president, there are certain things which are still lurking, or rather not still, but are lurking in the background when it comes to justice and the judiciary. So maybe this is a perfect segue for us to then go into some of those issues, even as we talk about what the LSK will or will not do. Certain things have come out, and there seems to be judicial favoritism when it comes to officers of the judiciary, whereby you can go about and you can say, well, protect us here because we happen to be judicial officers. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Is this a fallacy? Is it a fantasy, or is it a reality?
It's an issue of serious concern. Chapter 10 of the Constitution is the one that deals with the judiciary, and it talks about two underlying principles behind the judiciary. One is independence of the judiciary, and the second is accountability. And I've always said that independence is not a value by itself. It's a value at the service of accountability. The judiciary is not independent as an end in itself, but so that it can be accountable. So when independence is used as a shield against accountability, then there is a problem. So if there is a decision prohibiting investigations. We are not talking about summoning. We are not talking about arresting and taking to court. Prohibiting investigations. On its face, it is an overreach. And that is a concern. And so what has been happening is
by judicial officers, no less.
Yes. So what has been happening is that when, in some cases, not all cases, in some cases, when judges and judicial officers are undergoing some form of investigation, they rush to the court to stop the DPP, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, the Ethics Anti-Corruption Commission, from investigating them. And they say that it is a Judicial Service Commission to do it. When people file complaints at the Judicial Service Commission, they rush to court to say Judicial Service Commission is overreaching its role. It should not be doing what it's doing. So effectively, they are closing off all avenues of accountability in regards to investigations of corruption and misconduct. And the center will not hold. The constitution is not strong enough to hold persistent evasion of accountability by the judiciary in this situation, in these circumstances. So I have to be clear, because when each individual judge or judicial officer does it, they don't see the repercussions or the consequences, because they assume this is just one case. The constitution is strong enough to withstand my one case of avoiding scrutiny and accountability. But it is something that generates a momentum. The constitution is not strong enough to kind of like maintain its integrity if there is a whole arm of government that consistently fights against accountability. It's not possible. We need to do something about it.
But there's a problem here, because the words that you've used are heavy. You've talked about evasion. You've talked about, lack of purpose when it comes to accountability and the Constitution. But these are the vanguards. The judiciary is essentially the vanguard of the Constitution as an arm of government. So how do we then say that they fail to see the repercussions ahead, which is what essentially they do every day? They see the repercussions. When Kev takes me to court, they see the repercussions. And that's why we're there in the first place.
Yeah.
So if they protect themselves, which we've seen happens many a time, it's not just one case in isolation. If they protect themselves, how do they not see the repercussions of this?
The whole idea, the underlying philosophy of the Constitution is that too much power in any single arm or organ or institution or office of government is unsustainable. So the philosophy of the Constitution is to have checks and balances, to distribute power to various levels of government, to different arms, organs of government. And this is what secures the structure of power and governance. Regarding the judiciary, one of the things that you find in the oath of office that is in a schedule to the Constitution is that the individual judge should try and avoid situations of conflict of interest, and that they should make their decisions without fear, favor, ill will, or prejudice. And what we say of the individual judge also has to be said of the institution of judiciary as a whole. So the structure of the Constitution was to ensure this by having other arms and organs of government to assist the judiciary to be accountable. So this includes the Chapter 15 constitutional commissions, and there are many of them. Judicial Service Commission is one of them, Salaries and Remuneration Commission is another, etc. And this also includes the Judicial Service Commission in its role as the custodian of accountability and independence, the Constitution. So what has happened lately is that we've been seeing the judiciary, without the individual judge realizing they are doing it, because they are just dealing with the individual case, but collectively and gradually dismantle these structures of checks and balances in relation to themselves. So they are very good as a check and balance when it relates to other people, other organs of government, but no one is very good if there is no check and balance against themselves. The judiciary is not unique in the sense of that they are insulated from the temptations that affect all other citizens or organs. They are Kenyans like the rest of us.
That was going to be my question. That are they different because they are in an arm of government? Should they be treated differently because they are under the judiciary? Well,
there is one difference, which is that they are the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution. So Chapter 10 gives the judiciary very strong safeguards of independence, which are required, because when there's a dispute between other arms or organs of government, we all go to the judiciary. And when the judiciary is weak, and it is lacking independence, we all suffer, because then you have executive overreach, parliamentary impunity, and so on, ineffectiveness of other arms and organs of government. So the judiciary needs to be strong, and we want a strong judiciary to deal with the threats of everyone else. What I'm saying is that the judiciary is not well designed to deal with its own, with the threats that come from itself. It needs checks and balances. It deals with all the other threats very well. But when there is a conflict of interest, even the oath of the judges shows they need to have mechanisms for recognizing the conflict of interest and dealing with it. And if they don't deal with it, then it creates a kind of like a center for a certain cancer or rot to begin from within that eventually will damage their ability to deal with situations that affect other Kenyans.
And Mr. President, congratulations. So having identified and noted that, what is your pledge to learned friends who probably are of the view that there is this rot within the judiciary and that it needs to be dealt with? There are some lawyers and advocates who've been very vocal, particularly around some of this rot, and they've, even made proposals for certain actions to be taken against certain judicial officers. As LSK president, what is your word of confidence to this kind of your fellow learned friends?
So first is that we are very focused and committed to work with all well-meaning Kenyans and institutions, including the judiciary itself and the Judicial Service Commission, to help deal with the rot of corruption, misconduct, and lack of accountability in the judiciary. And I want to say that many judges and judicial officers are very hardworking. Majority of them are hardworking. They are delivering justice to Kenyans, and we need this, and we need to encourage them, and not to create the impression that it's the whole judiciary or a big chunk of the judiciary that is a problem. But as we do so, like any other institution or organ of government, we have to deal with the bad apples, because bad apples are found everywhere. Even in the legal profession, we have bad apples. We have to deal with them. So I want to assure lawyers and Kenyans that LSK is committed, working with all stakeholders, including the judiciary itself, including the Chief Justice, including the Judicial Service Commission, to ensure that we streamline the process of accountability, even as we strengthen the independence of the judiciary. And let me also make it clear that as we do so, we also want to strengthen the welfare of judges and JOs. They work very hard for Kenyans. Some of them work until late hours, writing rulings and judgments at short notice. And this is something that we need to appreciate. So we can't just be negative when talking about the judiciary. We want to push for their welfare strongly, want to push for their independence strongly, and at the same time to push for accountability strongly as well.
As you come into office, Mr. President, we are a few months into the election year, and Kenyans probably are looking forward to seeing the strength, the vigor of LSK, particularly defending citizens. This election is coming forward at a point in time when we see lack of compliance to certain legal requirements. There's a lot of negative sentiments, particularly when it comes to the spirit of cohesiveness of Kenyans. Blatant impunity, particularly insofar as, campaign financing, state officers engaging in, processes where they are not expected to engage in. And now we are talking about trust in institutions like IEBC, that young people are actually realizing that, yes, we have certain power now to be able to exert, to register as voters, etc. And LSK has been a very strong voice in the past. So as a president of LSK, short of few months into the election, what is this new thing that Kenyans should expect, especially insofar as the role of LSK in election-related discourse and also electoral disputes and reforms?
I think more than new things and inventing new things is to return to the constitutional values and principles that we find, in particular in Article 10 of the Constitution, in Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 regarding the system of elections and so on, and the legislature, to return to those principles. And what I want to also make it clear is that the first thing LSK is, it's a professional body for 18,000 active lawyers in practice. And the lawyers have to be mobilized because they are the frontline soldiers to secure this electoral justice and fairness and so on. And that's the first thing that LSK is going to do. We are going to mobilize our 18,000 members. They are there in all the counties. They are there advising the different politicians, the different players in the system, the different institutions. They are there in IEBC, in the office of the Registrar of Political Parties, in Parliament. They're in the Judiciary. Those in the Judiciary are not active lawyers, but they are lawyers anyway who have advanced to become judges. Even legal researchers are lawyers. So our first job is to mobilize our frontline soldiers, who are the 18,000 lawyers in active practice. And then, of course, LSK itself will play a role as the leadership institution for the legal profession. And we will ensure that we observe the entire process. We bring together other professional bodies, other civil society organizations interested in elections management, so that we mobilize Kenyans. And right now, we are very keen on the current initiative. It's been dubbed Niko Kadi to Kokadi, and whatever initiatives by Gen Z or other Kenyans to mobilize themselves to register for elections. We want to have free and fair elections that is verifiable and is accurately measured. And these elections, for them to be really reflective of the views of Kenyans, we need Kenyans to take their voters card or to register as voters. And we also need those Kenyans who are above 18 and are eligible to register to be processed by the ministry and the offices responsible for registering Kenyans and giving IDs to those who are above 18 so that they can effectively register as voters. And then we, of course, will need as a LSK to ensure that you observe the process of politicking that is leading up to the elections. Because free and fair elections, as the courts have said repeatedly, is not a one-day affair. It is not just an affair of August 2027. It starts with the pre-electoral period. And we have to ensure that civil and political rights of Kenyans during this period are upheld by everyone, so that everyone has a fair shake at persuading the electorate to vote for them.
We will, at least for the short period, then seeing how things form, often make reference to your predecessor. And she obviously won the hearts of the people by moving a lot of things, whereby the overarching principle here was the rule of law and following of it across category and across sector. She was then crucified for the people, then seemingly have taken a position whereby, around the whole compensation issue. It's not a secret, it's in the public eye. Because what that essentially showed is that you took a position with an administration that was not following the rule of law. That was clear. So it is also very clear that the side of the people seems to be a very important side to be on. But more importantly, the umbrella principle here is following the rule of law and insisting that in every aspect, no matter what it is, that the rule of law will be sacrosanct. Is that the same face that the LSK then would have under your leadership? Because it seems more and more, as you talk about Tukokadi, as you talk about, following with the judiciary, keeping sure that they keep themselves to account, it seems that more and more Kenyans are awoke to the realization that the rule of law, if you abide by it, then you're almost golden. Will that be the same thing?
This is something that for LSK arises from our foundational principles that are found in Section 4, 4A, 5 and 6 of the Law Society of Kenya Act. So it is our reason for being. You can't become a president of the Law Society of Kenya without pursuing this agenda. And of course, when you become a president, you learn from all your predecessors, especially the immediate predecessors. So I've learned a lot from President Faith Odhiambo and the great things she did. I've learned a lot from her predecessor, Eric Theory, Nelson Harvey, Allen Gishui, Isaac Okero, Eric Mutua, just to mention a few. And each of them has contributed something to where we are. So when you come into office, you can't come with the idea that you are the one who knows it all.
Yeah.
You first learn from what others have done, and you build on what they have done. But change is also an opportunity to adjust a few things where you feel you can add to what they've done and take LSK even higher, where you can focus on issues that maybe have not been done. That is what we all do. That is what leadership is about. So I want to say that for me, the issue of rule of law is very important, and I'm going to focus together with my council, because I'm not doing it alone. I'm doing it with the Council of the Law Society that was elected with me, my vice president and council members. I'm going to mobilize also the branches. They have leadership. We have 8 branches, each has its own executive. We have numerous chapters, each has its own committee leading the chapter, and indeed all lawyers, because we can only effect what we want to do if we mobilize the lawyers together to move in the same direction. But definitely, rule of law is an important issue. In fact, when I was campaigning, I had 4 key pillars. Rule of law was the first.
Yes.
The second was integrity and independence of both the bar and the bench, and we've talked a bit about that. The third was practice and welfare, because I also said you cannot expect the lawyer to be a champion and to fight for the rule of law of the rest of the country if their own practice environment is weak, if their own dignity is not upheld. We have to fight for the dignity of the lawyer so that they can fight for the dignity of all the other Kenyans. And finally, I said engagement, because an LSK that is strong has to continuously engage its members, its stakeholders, and also the public. So that's why I kept saying the time is ripe. So the time is ripe for rule of law, for integrity and independence, for practice and welfare of lawyers, and for engagement.
You run the risk of being pulled in very many different directions as a society, whereby because of the current frustration or the expectation of Kenyans that you would be the first port of call if something were going out of whack. And whereas there would be a responsibility or the duty of care to answer, it might have you running thin. How would you balance between the high demands that Kenyans have and also the work of the society to be seen as and to also practice upholding these 4 pillars that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's a question of strategy. What is the most effective strategy? LSK doesn't have the capacity to run to the aid of every Kenyan when they face rule of law violations. In fact, we don't even intend to. But our members, lawyers, have much greater capacity because there are 18,000 of them in active practice. And so we'll be encouraging members of the public to approach lawyers, because it is the legal profession that is meant to help them. But even lawyers don't work alone. They work with other institutions of government. They assist you when you've gone and reported a matter to the police, and maybe you are not getting assistance, sufficient assistance. They assist you in matters involving the Directorate of Public Prosecution. They assist you when you have a matter in court. There's an issue with the prisons, when you have contracts that maybe are not being complied with. When you have complaints against a public sector agency, they'll assist you as you lodge your complaint with the Commission on Administrative Justice. So actually the entire structure of government that is in the Constitution has that role of pursuing the rule of law, because it is a principle under Article 10 of the Constitution for every individual, every state organ, every public organ or agency, all of them are meant to be doing it. So LSK and the lawyers in the legal profession are meant to come on board when these other institutions are failing. And even there, we don't do it alone. We are other professional bodies that we can work together with. There are other civil society organizations we can work together with. Yourselves as the media, you have a role in highlighting issues of failure of the rule of law. So actually, every Kenyan has a role in this issue. LSK's role is a role of leadership and mobilizing its members to support individuals on case-by-case basis.
Mr. President, there's this notion around pending bills.
Yes.
For county governments and even national government, and there have been lots of accusations that lawyers actually are the ones who ascribe to the highest amounts of these pending bills, and that these bills are actually interfering with service delivery for what citizens expect. What would be your view around dealing with these pending bills that are actually accrued to lawyers for their legal services, to government ministries, departments, and agencies, and moving forward? How, therefore, would you propose that we sustain legal fees?
Okay, first, the largest amount of pending bills is actually for infrastructure projects. Massive infrastructure projects have been undertaken. The government has failed to pay contractors who have contracted and offered services. You have massive pending bills for other people who have been involved in public procurement and have offered goods and services to the public. Massive pending bills the government has ignored.
Yeah.
The education sector, the healthcare sector, the road sector are some of the ones with the largest amount of pending bills. Those pending bills have to be paid by the government unless they were procured corruptly and there's strong evidence against it, in which case the matter should go to court to be resolved there. And even among professionals, the government has massive pending bills against professionals in various sectors: education sector, health sector, building sector, and including the legal sector. So it is not true. In fact, it is a misdirection to give the impression that lawyers are anywhere close to the top. Lawyers are affected like all other professionals, and the problem is a burgeoning problem that needs to be dealt with. But of course, all pending bills, there may be some of them where there was irregular procurement, where there was fraud in the performance of the services or supply of the goods, where there was a bit of inflation. So those matters have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But I think it would be quite unfortunate to try and single out any individual sector. In fact, I saw the other day that the government now wants to settle pending bills of media houses. Your own media house is seriously affected by pending bills. If someone was to ask you whether the problem is Nation, Standard, and Citizen TV are the ones causing big pending bills, you say, gosh, we advertised, we procured for services. So it's the same thing in all the sectors. And I want you to look inwards as media, and the pending bills that you are suffering from, you recognize that it is the same with other professions.
I think that is very clear in the minds of many people, more than you may realize. There's something that maybe we can give you an assignment.
Yes.
I'm sure you are aware of it, but maybe it's one of the things that can be in your in-tray. Eddie Ouko used to be the Auditor General of Kenya.
Yes, Edward Ouko.
Yes. He's a distant relative. I'll tell you about that another time.
Okay.
Since his time,
Yes.
till Nancy Gathongo,
Yes.
there has never been investigation into and prosecution of folks who may have had their hand in the cookie jar. There may have been the thought of a recommendation when audit queries are raised and go unanswered, that we are dealing in times where people have audited and now are reporting on fiscal issues, financial issues in the budget for years gone by. Nobody has answered. Recommendations have been made. This year, 2026, is probably when we heard the most vehement recommendation from the Auditor General that you, members of parliament, must do something about this because the gaps that we are seeing in this spending is too much. Controller of Budget yesterday said that 3.3 trillion shillings is due in the next 12 calendar months. They said that we might be in a crisis when it comes to paying debt because we don't know where that money is going to come from. Meanwhile, they've also told us how there's been extravagant spending and we can't find. Can you imagine those two things are being said in the same sentence? There's been extravagance and then we don't know how we're going to pay our debt. Also, they've said that 80% of the money that's collected is going towards the payment of debt. All of this is happening, Mr. President, while the Auditor General is talking about holes. This last 7 months, she's been on a spree where she's talked about money disappearing. E-Citizen, I don't know. SHA 50 billion, 11 billion, E-Citizen 50 billion. I don't know. It goes on and on and on and says, Parliament, please, you have to investigate what's going on here, or at least call for it. EACC, ODPP, DCI, all the acronyms. However, we're still waiting. And there's a reason why I started with Eddie Oko, that they raise these issues. There's a legislature. There's a judiciary. As arms of government are not the incestuous love child of one the other. They are on the same par. Could that be something that can actually be looked at with all seriousness? Because the amounts of money that we are being told is lost is enough to actually take care of Kenya's issues. Enough.
Okay, so let me answer. First, let me give a clarification. There have been investigations and prosecutions over the years arising from audit queries. There have been public officers even who've been jailed arising from audit queries. So it's not that nothing has been done, but too little. I think where I agree with you is that not enough has been done.
Okay, I can see there.
And what has happened is that the role of the Auditor General, when they audit public offices and agencies, they ask for information, they ask for evidence.
Yes.
And if the evidence doesn't come, they ask a second time. And if it doesn't come a second time, then they do their audit report, they qualify. Qualify means that they are not satisfied that the accounts present a true and fair view. And once they have done that one, they send their audit report to Parliament. And their job is over at that stage. It's now the job of Parliament to process the audit reports. Many times they call these officers. The officers come. They start by making excuses. They say that no, the documents are available. It's the Auditor General who didn't ask us for the documents. So they also introduce a bit of confusion. They now give their side of the story. So one of the things that should happen at this moment is that there should be an ability for the Auditor General to do a follow-up report after Parliament has done its job. And I can tell you, when the Public Accounts Committee hold their hearings in Parliament, you have an officer from EACC present in the room many times. There might be an officer from DCI. There might be an officer from other public agencies, so that they can listen to the questions and the answers. They can see the documents and do further investigations themselves. So what I'm saying is that the infrastructure is there, and if the results are not coming out, we need to question what is the Auditor General doing about the possibility of follow-up reports once they receive the answers that are given during the hearings of the Parliamentary Accounts Committee. What is EACC doing in terms of investigation and charging people? And EACC themselves, they also say that, we do investigations, we take our files to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, they are brought back to us. Some of the cases have gone to court and they've been withdrawn. So you can see there's a lot of finger pointing. Everyone is doing something on their own, but together the results are not effective enough. And then Parliament itself, can refuse to give you more funds as a government agency if they feel you've not accounted for the funds that you are given before.
Have we ever seen that happen?
Well, in some cases it has happened that there's been a lot of negotiation and reduction of funding. But you see, if the funding line is for paying salaries, are you going to punish employees because the organization did not account? So the point is that there is need for a much stronger push involving all the organs that have been given responsibility in the law to fight against failures of accountability, financial accountability. More needs to be done, and the Law Society of Kenya will do what it can under public interest litigation. One of the things that I'm very happy about is that recently a decision of the High Court in a case involving the Rirutangong intended railway made it very clear that access to information, which is provided in the Constitution and even an Act of Parliament, is not something that will wiggle out of when a matter goes to court. And even government projects can be stopped if you don't supply the relevant information. So basically it has opened an avenue now for Kenyans to demand information the way Senator Mtata has done it over the years. And if government fails to supply information that it should, then even to stop that particular project that is sucking government funds. So we should be able to know now about Eurobond, about Standard Gauge Railway, about the expressway, and about all these other projects and issues where Kenyans are concerned. Was money used properly, using the route of access to information that is founded on Article 35 of the Constitution and the Access to Information Act and the Commission on Administrative Justice, that is the one that administers that particular law.
If I can keep pulling on that thread just a little bit, it's interesting that you mentioned this in terms of information, because one of the things that has been called for over the last, and it still continues to be a public outcry, is that the public debt register should actually be public. The National Debt Register should actually be public. We should know what exactly is happening and should be up to date.
Yes.
We're not up to date in terms of, if you go to the website, which I did yesterday actually, we're not at 2026 in terms of what is owed and what it was borrowed for, where it was borrowed from, and what is due.
Yes.
Say for the control of budget coming out yesterday to say, you know what, 80% of any collected money is then going towards debt. Number one. Number two, she said that in the next 12 months, you're going to have to pay 3.4 trillion shillings. We don't know where that money is going to come from. Now, here we are talking about the rule of law being upheld and that needs to happen, and that there needs to be accountability, transparency across the board, across the three arms of government. How can you do that if, number one, you don't know how much you owe? Majority of the money that should be used towards development is being gobbled up by debt, for which Kenyans don't even know if that debt in itself is not odious. How do you create a balance between those two, whereby you say we don't know how much we owe, and it's not a recommendation, it's a demand that it be made public, but we don't know, and there's a demand from external parties to have this money paid? How do you create a relationship, or how do you operate when all of these things seem to be cutting the legs off this ladder?
Okay, so you and I don't know how much is owed, but Treasury does know. And they have a public debt register. They have all the information. And what they give us every year during the budget cycle is a summary of the amounts that are owed without the detailed particulars. So it should be possible for us to use access to information processes in the law to get more information and to demand that register be made public. So we do know, or at least there are people who know.
Somebody knows.
Somebody knows. And they are paying. And among the people who know or who should know is the controller of budget and the auditor general, because if they don't know, they have the authority not to authorize the release of any funds from the consolidated fund. So they ought to know, and they ought to be able to even tell us. So now it is for us as citizens to exercise our rights and our access to information, to seek that information from Treasury and the controller of budget and the auditor general. And then even Parliament itself has the right to summon these officers and seek that information. So that is number one. Number two, on the question of payments, of course, there is a whole discussion around odious debt. And there have been important decisions, even in international arbitration and international court structures, that if an amount has been incurred on the basis of corruption, and the corruption is clear and there's strong evidence of corruption, it was not used, it was contrary to the law of the country, it was not used for the benefit of the country. There have been decisions that have questioned whether such sums are payable. I think one of the problems is that the people who are implicated or potentially implicated in that corruption that has resulted in odious debt many times are our leaders. And so their interest in getting to the bottom of the odious debt saga tends to be quite weak and not very strong. And coalitions have started building of citizens, public-spirited citizens who are interested in exploring the question of odious debt. Once the information has become available about all the debts that Kenya has, then we can begin that investigation. So LSK would be very happy to participate in that process together with professional bodies like ISPAC, I believe, and others that are in that sector, legal, financial sector, etc. But while that is being done, if Kenya was to suspend paying debts that fall due, of course, that would cause a major crisis, financial crisis for the country, which would contribute to major suffering for the ordinary citizen. So Kenya as a country must demonstrate to its development partners and third parties that it honors its contracts. While at the same time, we need to work very hard and very fast to identify any odious debts that can be separated from now the bundle of authentic contracts and debts that we have to pay.
I'm just wondering, Mr. President, if you look at the context within which I'm sure LSK operates in, there are many things that are happening, from payments that are supposed to be given to victims of various injustices, to elections that are upcoming that we've talked about. There are concerns around the cost of living, many things. And a lot of these things, as you rightfully said, the leaders of the country really come to the fore. And so I'm just wondering whether there are any key legal reforms or bills that as LSK or the president of the society you'd be seeking to follow through or to present to Parliament?
At the moment, we have been undergoing an internal process of review of our own laws that affect the work of lawyers, the Advocates Act and the Law Society of Kenya Act. And probably over the next few months, we will have something to present. That is in regard to our own practice areas.
Okay.
In regard to other issues of governance that affect the country, at the moment, our biggest focus is to ensure that the laws in place are working. There's a tendency to throw more law at problems instead of more enforcement at problems. And they say that if you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So when you go to Parliament and you present a problem to them, their hammer is lawmaking. So they make additional laws. And sometimes you get the perception of progress, but you're not really solving the issue. So for me, personally, my focus is not to make more laws, but to get the laws that are currently in existence to work effectively. And of course, in that process, if we find some laws are being persistently abused or misused and they need clarification, then amendments would be welcome. But right now, our focus is, can we work together to implement the laws that already exist and that are meant to safeguard the public good and that are being ignored or misused broadly by different individuals or institutions, both in the public and private sector.
Mr. President, something that was very close to the internal issues and controls that you are talking about within LSK was unemployment and mentorship of young lawyers. And I followed through your campaigns for all the candidates, including yours. And one question that you were all asked then was this mentorship of young lawyers and also the kind of safeguarding principles that you exact. And so what is your plan, especially insofar as engagement of young lawyers and those who are coming into the practice?
First of all, young lawyers are the future of the legal profession. Young professionals are the future of any profession. And the legal profession has transformed quite a bit because of the influx of young lawyers. We welcome them because they are the future of the profession. And when I say the future, they are even the present situation of the profession is impacted a lot by young lawyers. Every profession, you need to have mechanisms of transmitting experience and values from those who have been there a bit longer and have had more opportunity to benefit from their own predecessors. And mentorship is one of those mechanisms. It's not been working very well, partly because there's been a large volume of influx of young lawyers and the seniors have not been mobilized enough to help do that mentorship. So definitely one of the things we want to do is to come up with a structure that motivates more seniors to be involved in deliberate mentorship, because you have the spontaneous, the occasional or episodic mentorship, and then you should also have structured mentorship programs that are more like nationwide, that we work together with branches and chapters. We motivate the lawyers by even giving them some points or some merit-based system of recognition, so that it becomes something that we are all proud to do. And that there can also be some kind of measurement of how much you've done it. So this is something we are going to be unveiling over the next few weeks and months. But the core goal and idea is clear, that every lawyer should be involved in mentorship. For me, I think that even the young lawyers themselves should be involved in mentorship. If you are 5 years, you can be mentoring the 2-year old lawyer, post-experience, and the one who's 2 years post-experience can be mentoring the interns and the pupils, and even law students. So mentorship is something that you give and you receive at the same time. That is the idea I would like to build, so that we all become proud of mentoring others.
Yeah. The next big thing that Kenyans will deal with, knock on wood and all things remaining constant, is the election. And the body that is tasked with making sure that the process of elections before and on the day and then after is the IEBC. Upholding of the rule of law by the IEBC is an expectation of Kenyans, but it's also in the Constitution. Now, there are worries. Kenyans are a bit jittery about whether that will happen. And some of the words that we've already heard coming out are things like voter suppression. And this is linked directly to one thing that you mentioned before about people coming out to register to vote, because, it's your responsibility, it's your right to then come out and do that. But then there's the fear that a body, though independent, may then actually be the stumbling block in the way of this freedom. How would the LSK engage with the IEBC to ensure that this particular thing is actually working and working well?
Okay, so let me start by using an analogy. When we think about fighting corruption, sometimes we may assume that the one body that should answer all questions is the Ethics Anti-Corruption Commission, because it has a constitutional responsibility of fighting corruption. But the truth is that you need a whole government approach and a whole society approach to fighting corruption. Cabinet, police, judiciary, everyone needs to fight corruption. And EACC's job should basically be advisory, directing, etc. It's the same approach with elections. Elections cannot all be given as a responsibility to IEBC.
Okay.
For example, IEBC is not the one that gives people IDs, and you need an ID to register as a voter. IEBC is not the one that secures the polling stations. That's the Kenya Police, and you need security in the polls. IEBC is not the one that registers political parties. IEBC is not the one that debates laws. That is Parliament. So the truth is that IEBC has an important role to play, but you need other organs to play their roles. If, for example, Parliament doesn't give IEBC adequate funds to perform its role, there is a problem. If an IEBC decides to do procurement, there is injunction of all those procurement processes in the courts, and they delay ability of IEBC to implement its role, there'll be a problem. So I want to say that IEBC has an important role, but is not the only role in regards to election preparedness. And for IEBC, what we want to do as LSK is we want to engage them constructively and find out what are the challenges they are facing, and also hold them to account if we find that they are falling short of the expectations of Kenyans or their mandate. And this is something that we are going to do for IEBC as the most important actor for free and fair elections, but not the only actor. And we are going to engage also the other actors that we think are important in free and fair elections. So there's a matrix, there's a scorecard or a checklist. You can check various issues of election preparedness, beginning with civic education, voter education, registration of voters, the question of boundaries. IEBC has already said it will not have time to delimit boundaries, and we want to check that and see, does this make sense? Of course, by now we're already in March.
Yeah, it's too late now.
Yes, it's a bit late, but they had until July this year. Personally, I'm not happy that they made that decision, but we want to see whether it is a reasonable decision. The judiciary has already set up its committee on election preparedness. LSK is going to do the same. We are going to engage the registrar of political parties and see what are they doing to ensure political parties are compliant with the law, and so on. So there's a checklist of things to be done, and we need to ensure that those are being done. But I can tell you, right now, the most important pre-electoral activity is to ensure that Kenyans are allowed to exercise their civil and political rights, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, freedom of picketing, and all those other things, and the political rights that are found in the Constitution, because that's how you mobilize politically and try to persuade Kenyans to vote for you and your agenda. And once Kenyans are educated, they have been mobilized, they've decided which are the characters they want and they don't want, then you ensure that the framework, the structure, the infrastructure for securing the opinion of Kenyans on the ballot box is safe and secure.
Indeed. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but from what you're saying, that the months ahead, though busy, it seems as though you're ready to go after it. We're looking forward to what the days ahead have. Kenyans have placed, maybe you would say misplaced responsibility on your shoulders, but they've placed it there anyway. So it'll be interesting to see what the next months have in store. Charles Kanjama is the president of the Law Society of Kenya. Has been our guest this hour. Thank you for taking time to explain to us certain things, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future, of course.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to engaging. The Law Society of Kenya is ready, able, and willing to work with Kenyans to secure their rights and the rule of law.
Asante sana. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.